In 1871, a German explorer named Karl Mach arrived at the ruins of a massive stone city in southern Africa. He looked at the walls, perfectly constructed, no mortar, stones fitted so precisely they had stood for centuries without crumbling. And he made a decision. He picked up a piece of wood from a doorframe, sniffed it, and announced that it smelled like Lebanese cedar, which meant Phoenicians must have brought it from the Middle East, which meant Africans couldn't possibly have built this city. He wrote in his journal, "A civilized nation must once have lived here." In other words, not a black one. That single sniff of a doorframe launched one of the greatest cover-ups in archaeological history, a lie that lasted 100 years and buried the truth about one of the most powerful civilizations Africa ever produced.
In the 11th century, the Shona people of Central Africa built Great Zimbabwe, an administrative center, royal home, and the largest pre-colonial city in sub-Saharan Africa. Its architecture is extraordinary. Unscalable stone walls constructed entirely by hand and without mortar, fitted so precisely they have stood for centuries. At its peak, the city housed up to 18,000 people. It controlled the gold trade between the African interior and the Indian Ocean coast, connecting Central Africa to Arabia, Persia, and China. Pottery, architecture, radiocarbon dating, metallurgy, settlement patterns, and oral traditions all point to indigenous African builders whose skills rivaled those of many medieval societies around the world. Inside the walls, a mysterious conical tower, 30 feet tall, solid stone. No entrance, no rooms. Nobody knows what it was for. Sacred objects, called Zimbabwe birds, carved from soapstone, placed at the highest points of the city, watching over everything below. No inscription names a king, marks a date, or explains who raised the walls or why. A city that spoke through its stones and refused to explain itself. When Karl Mach published his conclusions in 1871, the colonial world embraced them immediately. Cecil Rhodes, the British colonizer who controlled southern Africa, appropriated this narrative to firm up his imperial dream. Western excavators were brought to the site, churning out stories that drew imaginary parallels between Great Zimbabwe and places in the Middle East. In 1889, another explorer bribed a local official and stole one of Great Zimbabwe's secret bird carvings, objects of deep spiritual importance to the Shona people. In 1891, James Bent carried out the first archaeological dig, carelessly, and agreed the site could not be African. Rhodes funded the trips. School children across Rhodesia were taught that foreigners built Great Zimbabwe. But here's the part that makes this story truly dark. The evidence was always there. In 1905, David Randall McIver saw that artifacts at Great Zimbabwe were identical to those still used by the Shona. Arab and Persian glass beads found at the site dated to the 14th and 15th centuries, not biblical times. Later, a female-led excavation confirmed the same thing. African builders, African artifacts, African city. The story of how that obvious fact was buried, literally dug up and thrown away, is one of the cleanest examples we have of how history gets erased on purpose. The colonial government didn't just ignore the evidence, they destroyed it, dug it up, threw it away, and replaced it with a story that served their power. In 1980, the country gained independence from colonial rule. It took its name from the ancient stone capital, a deliberate reversal of the colonial era claim that Africans hadn't built it. Zimbabwe, named after the city, a nation reclaiming its own history. But the real mysteries of Great Zimbabwe, the ones that have nothing to do with colonialism, remain completely unsolved. Then, sometime in the 15th century,
Great Zimbabwe was abandoned. The abandonment is genuinely unresolved. Environmental strain, trade shifts, drought, political change, the strongest competing theories, but no definitive answer. 18,000 people gone. The conical tower still unexplained. No archaeologist has agreed on what it was for. The Zimbabwe birds, most were stolen during colonial excavations and scattered across private collections in Europe. Only a few remain where they were placed, still watching over empty walls. The silent passageways of the hill complex invite endless curiosity. The lives, beliefs, ambitions, and dreams of the people who once filled those stones with laughter, ceremony, commerce, and hope, almost entirely unknown. Great Zimbabwe is not a mystery about who built it. That question was answered a century ago and ignored for a century after. The real mystery is darker. How do you erase an entire civilization from history? You control the archaeology. You fund the excavations. You fire the scientists who tell the truth. You teach the lie to children until the lie becomes the story everyone knows. It worked for almost 100 years. And Great Zimbabwe is just one example. The question that should keep you up at night isn't who built this city. It's how many other cities are there whose stories were buried on purpose that we still haven't found. Subscribe, because next week we go looking for one of them.